Friday nights were supposed to be easy. Laughter, a little wine, a few shared stories. That night, the air inside the restaurant smelled of garlic and roasted tomatoes, the kind of scent that usually made me feel safe. But as Andrew and I walked in, I felt something shift. Maybe it was the low hum of conversation, or maybe it was the woman sitting a little too close to his seat. She had this effortless beauty, sleek brown hair, dark eyes, confidence that filled the space before she even spoke. Andrew turned to me, his smile polished, almost rehearsed. "Honey, this is Sabrina. She's been a lifesaver on the new campaign." Sabrina rose slightly, her hand brushing his arm as she smiled. "Oh, so this is the famous Natalie. Andrew talks about you all the time." I smiled back, polite and steady. "I hope all good things." She laughed, a little too easily. "Mostly." The table erupted in small chuckles, but my heart didn't join in. The way she looked at him wasn't professional. It was familiar. We took our seats, the room glowing in candlelight and soft music. I told myself I was imagining things. I always do that. I overthink. Still, every time Andrew leaned toward her, every shared glance, every quiet laugh, I felt it. Something beneath the surface, small but sharp, like a splinter. I tried to focus on the bread basket, the scent of basil, the sound of cutlery tapping plates. But I couldn't shake the thought. There's something between them, something I was never meant to see. As the night went on, laughter filled the table like a warm current. People swapped work stories, inside jokes flew over my head, and I smiled when it felt expected. Andrew was in his element, charming, witty, perfectly at ease. I'd always admired that about him, but tonight, it didn't feel like admiration. It felt like watching a show I suddenly realized I wasn't part of. Every time Sabrina laughed at something he said, I felt that invisible thread between them tighten, and I started to wonder how long it had been there. I studied her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when he spoke, the tiny pause before she smiled, as if waiting for his approval. It wasn't overt, but it was there. I'd spent years learning Andrew's language, the subtle cues, the half-smiles that said more than words, and what I saw between them wasn't new conversation. It was history, the kind that hides in plain sight, wrapped in laughter and good manners. At one point, she reached for the bottle of wine just as he did, their hands brushing. He laughed it off, a casual, "after you," but I caught it. The spark in her eyes, the way he looked down a second too long. My pulse quickened, but I said nothing. I just folded my napkin neatly, took a sip of wine, and told myself I was imagining it. Still, some part of me, the quiet, watchful part, whispered otherwise. "You've seen this before, Natalie. You just didn't want to believe it then either." By the time dessert arrived, I'd mastered the art of pretending. I laughed at the right moments, asked about their campaign, and even complimented Sabrina's dress, a silky green that clung to her confidence like armor. She thanked me, cheeks flushed from the wine, eyes darting briefly to Andrew before she looked away. He caught that glance too. And that was the moment I knew I wasn't wrong. My instincts never screamed. They whispered. And that night, they whispered loud enough to drown out the laughter around me. The waiter placed a tiramisu in front of us, candles flickering, wine glasses half empty. Andrew reached for my hand across the table, a gesture that should have comforted me. But instead, it felt rehearsed, like a man following choreography he'd memorized. I squeezed his hand gently, smiled, and looked at him the way a loving wife should. But inside, I was rewinding every detail, every glance, every brush of fingers, every shared laugh. My heart wasn't breaking yet. It was observing, storing evidence. As we said our goodbyes, Sabrina hugged me, too warmly, too long. "It was lovely meeting you," she said. Her perfume lingered on my sleeve, sharp and expensive. I smiled. Likewise. On the drive home, Andrew hummed along to the radio, oblivious. And I watched the streetlights blur by, my reflection faint in the window. Something had shifted. I didn't have proof, not yet. But I knew this wasn't over. Dinner started like any other night out with Andrew's colleagues. Too much chatter, too much wine, and too many stories about people I barely knew. The restaurant glowed in soft amber light, laughter floating above the clinking of glasses. I told myself to relax, to stop replaying every glance from the last dinner. Maybe I'd been unfair. Maybe my imagination had run wild, but deep down, I already knew better. When a woman's peace of mind starts whispering, it's rarely wrong. Andrew was at his most charming, the kind of host who made everyone feel like the evening revolved around them. I watched him from across the table, smiling, performing, sipping his wine like everything in his life was perfectly aligned. And for a moment, I almost let myself be fooled again. Maybe things were fine. Maybe I could forget that flicker of familiarity between him and Sabrina. Maybe. Then it happened. The waiter leaned in to pour more wine, and Andrew said something funny. I don't even remember what. Everyone laughed, loud and easy. Sabrina laughed too, her hand brushing his arm, and through her laughter came two small words that changed everything. "Oh, stop it, Drew Bear." Time didn't just slow down, it stopped. Forks hovered midair, glasses hung frozen halfway to lips. Drew Bear. The words lingered above the table like smoke no one dared to breathe in. Sabrina's face drained of color almost instantly. Andrew's laugh died in his throat, his knuckles whitening around his glass. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But no one was moving. Everyone had heard it. I smiled, calm as ever. "I'm sorry," I said softly, my voice cutting through the silence. "What did you just call him?" Sabrina blinked, her voice trembling. "Oh, just a nickname. From the office." A friend at the table snorted before they could stop themselves. "Drew Bear, that's oddly specific." Andrew forced a laugh, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "It's just a silly team joke," he said, waving it off. But his hand shook when he reached for his glass again. I leaned back in my chair, still smiling. "Oh, I'd love to hear it," I said. "Go on." No one spoke. Sabrina looked down, her face red and still. Andrew stared at his plate, pretending to laugh again. But I'd seen it, the way guilt moved through him like a shadow. And while everyone else tried to salvage the moment, I just sat there, quietly collecting the pieces of truth he thought he'd buried. The laughter around the table tried to come back, but it never quite did. It limped, awkward and thin, like a melody missing its rhythm. Andrew changed the subject, too fast, too eager, and people followed because that's what polite company does. Pretend not to notice. But I noticed everything. The way his hand trembled when he reached for the bread, the way Sabrina avoided his eyes, the way no one dared look at me. Inside, I felt oddly steady. No rage, no tears, just this still, cold awareness settling in like winter air. I watched them talk, or rather, pretend to. Their smiles cracked at the edges, their words stumbled. And through it all, I smiled too, my fork gliding through my plate as if I hadn't just witnessed the truth slip out between two careless laughs. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to ask for clarity. The nickname had already given me everything. When we finally stood to leave, Andrew slipped his arm around my waist. His touch felt foreign now, too heavy, too familiar to belong to a stranger, yet that's what he'd become. As we stepped into the night, the cool breeze hit my face, sharp and clean. I looked up at the sky, calm and still, and thought, "You can lie to everyone at that table, Andrew. But you just told me the truth." When we got home, Andrew acted like nothing had happened. He loosened his tie, kicked off his shoes, and poured himself a drink like it was just another Friday night. I watched him move around the kitchen, so casual, so certain, and for a second, I marveled at his confidence. It takes a special kind of arrogance to pretend your secret didn't just fall out of someone else's mouth in front of 10 people. He leaned against the counter, glass in hand. "So," I said lightly, "Drew Bear, huh?" He laughed, too loud, too forced. "Come on, Nat. Don't start. It's just a dumb nickname." "Right," I said, nodding slowly. "And she just happened to use it in public?" "You're reading too much into it. I told you it's a joke." I smiled. letting my voice turn soft. You're right. I always take things too seriously. He relaxed instantly. That was Andrew, always relieved when the storm he expected never came. He had no idea I wasn't a storm. I was something quieter, something that didn't flash or roar. I was still water, watching him drown himself, one careless breath at a time. Later that night, while he showered, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the muted glow of his laptop. The same laptop he guarded like a vault. For years, I'd respected that boundary. But tonight, respect felt misplaced. I opened it. The password, still my birthday. That almost made me laugh. For a man so careful, he could be painfully predictable. The inbox was a map of his double life. Hotel confirmations, late-night messages. Can't wait to see you. You made today bearable. And then, the one that sealed it. Good night, my bear. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not one tear. Because it wasn't pain anymore. It was knowledge. Cold, sharp, empowering. I'd spent years thinking love was about trust, about faith. Turns out, it's also about evidence. I heard the water shut off in the bathroom. I closed the laptop, slid it back into place, and lay down, pretending to scroll through my phone. When he came out, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "You're quiet tonight." I smiled back. "Just tired," I said. But in my head, I was wide awake and waiting. The next morning, I woke up before him, the same way I had for years. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and watched the sunlight crawl across the kitchen floor. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. Every sound, every habit, every breath between us now carried a secret weight. He walked in, kissed my cheek, and asked about breakfast like nothing had shifted. And that's when I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. Comfortable, unguarded, blind. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Anger gives away power, and I wasn't ready to lose mine. So I smiled more, listened more, and memorized every lie he told. Each late meeting, each "I'll be home soon," each "you worry too much." They became part of a quiet pattern, and I collected them all like pieces of a puzzle he didn't know I was solving. Every word he spoke became evidence. Every movement became motive. At night, I'd lie beside him, breathing in rhythm with his, pretending to sleep. In the dark, my thoughts formed something steady, a plan, still shapeless but alive. I didn't need to rush. Men like Andrew always expose themselves when they think they've gotten away with it. And when he did, I'd be ready. Patience became my closest ally. Weeks passed, and I made sure life looked perfectly normal. I laughed at his jokes, asked about work, and even kissed him goodbye each morning like I always did. He didn't notice the change, how my silence had shifted from trust to strategy. That's the thing about men like Andrew. They mistake calm for forgiveness. And I let him. Every smile I gave him was a setup he didn't see coming. One evening over dinner, I floated the idea casually. "You've been working so hard lately," I said, slicing through my steak. "Why don't we host a dinner for your team? A thank you for all their effort." His face lit up instantly, pride blooming where guilt had once lived. "Really? That's thoughtful of you," he said. I just smiled. "I want to meet everyone properly. It'll be fun." He agreed without hesitation, already picturing himself as the perfect husband, surrounded by admiring co-workers. I kept my tone light, warm, grateful. Inside, though, I was already arranging the details in my mind. The table, the guests, the timing. Every good trap needs a stage. And this one would be lit by candlelight. The night of the dinner, everything looked perfect. The kind of perfection that takes hours to stage and only seconds to shatter. Candles flickered across the dining room, jazz hummed softly in the background, and the smell of roasted herbs drifted through the air. I wore a navy dress, understated but sharp, and greeted each guest with a warmth that disarmed them. "Natalie, this is wonderful," someone said. "You really outdid yourself." I smiled. I try. But inside, I was already listening for every breath between Andrew and her. Sabrina arrived last. She looked stunning, of course. She always did. Her eyes darted to me when she walked in, then quickly to Andrew. I caught that glance, tucked it away, and offered her a glass of wine. "I'm so glad you could make it," I said, my tone smooth as silk. She smiled back, but it trembled at the edges. "Wouldn't miss it," she said. Her hands shook slightly when she set down her purse. That's when I knew she felt it too, the unease, the weight of what was waiting beneath all this civility. Dinner began beautifully. Laughter flowed again, stories spilled freely, and Andrew beamed like a man proud of his life, his wife, his success. I moved through the table like a hostess in control of every detail, because I was. Every plate, every sip, every compliment was just part of the lullaby I was playing before the silence. And Sabrina? She laughed, she drank, she tried to meet my eyes, but she couldn't hold them, not for long. Halfway through dinner, as laughter softened into comfort, I looked across the table at Sabrina and said sweetly, "Sabrina, I'd love your opinion on something." Her fork paused midair. "You and Andrew seem very close." The room went still, not silent yet, just waiting. She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, we just work well together," she said, her voice light but strained. I smiled. "Yes, I can tell, especially by the way you call him Drew Bear." Gasps rippled through the table like dropped glass. Sabrina froze. Andrew's fork clattered against his plate. "Natalie," he began. "Stop." I raised my hand, my tone even. "No, please. Don't stop me now. I've been quiet long enough." My pulse was steady, almost peaceful. I reached beside me, sliding a printed sheet onto the table. Emails, dates, signatures, his and hers. "Love you, Bear," it read in black and white. The proof lay there, shining under the candlelight like confession itself. No one spoke. Sabrina's face crumbled. She stood so fast her chair nearly toppled. Andrew just sat there, stunned, staring at the words he'd written with his own hand. I looked at him, not with fury, but finality. "You see, Andrew," I said softly, "I didn't destroy this. You did. I just set the table." When the last guest left, the silence felt deafening. The clink of glasses, the laughter, the whispers, all gone. Only the faint smell of wine and wax lingered, curling around the wreckage of what used to be our life. Sabrina had fled in tears. Andrew hadn't moved. He just sat there at the head of the table, his hands buried in his hair, staring at nothing. I stood across from him, arms folded, watching the man I'd once trusted turn into a stranger sitting in my dining room. Finally, he lifted his head, his voice breaking. "You humiliated me," he said. I almost laughed, the irony too sharp to ignore. "No, Andrew," I replied quietly. "You humiliated yourself. I just gave the audience." His eyes flashed with anger, then softened into panic. "Please, we can fix this. Don't throw everything away over one mistake." I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. "Oh, it's already fixed," I said. "The house is in my name. The accounts are frozen. You can go stay with your little pet name." His face went pale, his jaw trembling, and I felt it. Not joy, not triumph, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when the truth finally finishes burning. He stood up then, pacing, running his hands through his hair like a man searching for a version of himself that no longer existed. "Natalie, please," he whispered. "I made a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you." I almost pitied him. Almost. "You didn't hurt me tonight, Andrew," I said softly. "You did that months ago. Tonight you just confirmed it." He sank into a chair again, his shoulders collapsing under the weight of his own choices. For years I'd protected him, defended him, built him up. And now I was watching him fall apart, quietly, beautifully, inevitably. He tried again, desperate now. "We can talk about this, Nat. We can fix it. You still love me, don't you?" I tilted my head, studying him. Love, I said, letting the word hang between us. Love doesn't survive deceit. It suffocates under it. His eyes glistened, but I'd seen enough tears in my lifetime, and I wasn't about to waste any of mine. I walked to the door, opened it, and said simply, "You should go." He hesitated, waiting for the familiar version of me, the forgiving one, the soft-spoken one. But she was gone. The woman standing there now wasn't his wife anymore. She was the lesson he never thought he'd have to learn. After he left, the silence felt different, not heavy, not suffocating, but clean. I stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at the empty driveway, the faint glow of his taillights fading into the night. For the first time in years, the house was mine in every sense. My walls, my air, my peace. I gathered the wine glasses, one by one, listening to the faint clink as they met the sink. Each sound felt like a punctuation mark on the story I'd finally finished. I sat at the dining table where it had all unraveled, tracing the edge of the printed emails still lying there. The words that once gutted me now looked small, pathetic even. How strange that something so trivial could burn down an entire marriage. But as I looked around, I didn't see ruins. I saw space, wide, open, waiting to be rebuilt. He had lost control of the story. I had taken it back. In the morning, I packed his remaining things neatly, folded his shirts, left his cufflinks by the door. There was no note, no explanation, just absence, the one thing he'd never expected from me. And as I locked the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Months later, my life looked nothing like it used to, and for once, that felt like a blessing. I'd sold the house, the one that had echoed with secrets, and moved into a small apartment downtown. The walls were white, the light was soft, and the noise of the city below reminded me I was alive. Mornings began with coffee on the balcony, the hum of traffic replacing the silence that used to suffocate me. I'd taken a new job at a design firm. Long hours, creative chaos, laughter that didn't hide pain. One Saturday, my friend Clara stopped by, her arms full of croissants and curiosity. "I still can't believe you kept your cool through all that," she said, shaking her head as she kicked off her shoes. I smiled, pouring her coffee. "He underestimated me," I said. "That's the thing about men like him. They think you'll break, not rebuild." She laughed, but I could see it in her eyes, the admiration, the quiet understanding of what it takes to survive without bitterness. We sat by the window, sipping coffee, sunlight stretching across the table. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was healing. I felt healed. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I'd learned to own it, to shape it into something that belonged to me, not him. Clara leaned back, grinning. "And Sabrina?" she asked, the name slipping out like a question wrapped in curiosity. I stirred my coffee, watching the swirl of cream and color. "Oh, she left him too," I said lightly. "Turns out bears aren't very loyal animals." Clara burst out laughing, nearly spilling her drink, and I joined her. A laugh that felt clean, unforced, whole. For months, I'd carried that story like a wound. Now, it felt more like a scar, proof that I'd healed, not that I'd hurt. We talked for hours, about work, about freedom, about how good it feels to wake up without dread. The kind of conversations that remind you that life doesn't end when someone betrays you. It begins when you decide to stop waiting for an apology. As the afternoon sun dipped behind the buildings, I looked out at the skyline, glass, gold, and possibility. I wasn't the same woman who once sat in a crowded restaurant trying to convince herself she was imagining things. She was gone. I smiled, setting down my cup, my reflection framed in the window beside the city lights. "He taught me that love built on lies collapses fast," I whispered, almost to myself. "But revenge built on patience stands forever." And for the first time, the words didn't sting. They felt like truth, my truth.